Hi, Edward. I was hoping you could introduce yourself and tell the audience about MAC-MOD.
MAC-MOD Analytical is a company that was built in 1986. We're in the Chaddsford, Pennsylvania area, which is about 30, 40 minutes from Philadelphia. We're a provider of chromatography columns and other accessories. We've had a range of products that have been part of our product mix for a long time. So you might recognize some of the brands, whether it's from the start of our company with Zorbax and then, into the 90s and 2000s with the ACE product and then Halo into the 2006. And now as we branch out further into other products as well. So people tend to know us either from our direct name MacMod or one of our brands as well. So I'm the vice president of MacMod Analytical and co-owner, and I co-own the company with my brother actually, who his name is Jeff Faden, and he's the president of MacMod. We've both been at the company for nearly 15 years each, and we're excited to continue to provide our chromatography service and know-how to the industry. So yeah, so that's MacMod in a nutshell, I suppose.
Very cool. Yeah, it's always nice to meet another person who's involved with a family business, as Organimation is.
Yeah.
We first met in person at the American Society of Mass Spectrometry conference, which was last month, I believe, even though we had talked online a little bit before with our mutual interest in chromatography. And a day or two after we spoke at your booth, I came across the poster titled Laboratory Considerations when Analyzing PFAS Containing Samples. My understanding was that this poster summarized some of the challenges that a chemist in a standard lab setup might face when trying to analyze those PFAS samples. I was hoping you could talk about the potential sources of PFAS contamination that you identified and what we consider a standard lab setup.
Yeah, sure. When analyzing the PFAS by LCMS, we're typically looking to detect and quantify PFAS at really low levels, which means that the risk of the sample contamination is really the challenge. So this could occur in the natural environment when collecting the samples or in the laboratory environment when processing the samples. So many of our customers will look to perform the work in dedicated laboratory facilities. In Avantor's research lab in the UK, they undertake a variety of R&D and application work, given the widespread presence of PFAS in both the human and natural environments. We saw this as a good opportunity to study potential sources of contamination in the laboratory setup that could potentially impact the analysis and give a better understanding of the challenges our customers might face when carrying out this like very trace level PFAS analysis. So we undertook a screening of various commonly used materials and consumables. So some of them might be tissue or tinfoil, gloves, sticky tape, and found that many of them contained detectable levels of PFAS that could be extracted into the organic solvent. So this was knowledge that was valuable to us as it allowed us to exclude these items from our working practices. So we used alternative materials to be used to minimize that contamination. So we also tested essential laboratory consumables such as the polypropylene tips, sample collection bottles, containers, vials. Many of these contain no detectable PFAS. We did find one brand of vial cap, though, which did contain an extractable PFAS. So this allowed us to advise customers on how to test their consumable and for us to recommend suitable consumables based on the knowledge in the scientific real world. One of the most troublesome sources of the PFAS contamination that we encountered originated from the gas line tubing, which supplied our nitrogen generator with the compressed air. So We found that this resulted in the contamination of samples with one of the shorter chain PFAS. But by switching this to an alternative nitrogen source, we were able to eliminate this source of contamination. But this example demonstrated for us how challenging PFAS analysis can be. And then eliminating sources of contamination is a big issue people face because you're looking at such trace amount of PFAS when you're looking at these samples. So anything that could be coming from the environment of the lab is really a concern.
And that's a great segue into the next question. It's pretty basic, but can you explain in general terms why PFAS contamination is just so pervasive, both in the laboratory, of course, but just in environmental settings? These compounds are everywhere.
Right. Right. And we sort of call them the forever chemical as well. So there are a range of like thousands of man-made chemicals containing these carbon fluorine bonds. We really only talk about 8 or 9 of them generally that are regulated, but there's thousands, and to be totally honest, they're creating even more, and they're now called ultra short PFAS. This is another concern people are worried about, but they've been used extensively since the 1940s for an enormous range of applications. And basically, it's because they have a high number of desirable, useful properties such as excellent water, grease, and stain repellents, surfactant properties. And they're also immensely stable due to the strength of the carbon fluorine bonds. I think originally they were used in one of the world wars to protect the tanks from getting like debris and water inside the axles of the wheels and stuff like that. So it's always been sort of this industrial application, but PFAS have been applied to the manufacture of a huge range of consumer products, whether it be waterproof clothing, which we might all use for like working out or what have you, upholstery treatments, nonstick cookware. So that was a big concern, is the cookware, because it could come off when you heat it. Food contact materials and firefighting foams. So this range of uses has led to the widespread entry into the natural environment, where these properties, along with potential toxicity at low levels, becomes a real issue. Their chemical stability means that they show extreme persistence in the environment, so that's why they're named forever chemicals, or nicknamed that way. They don't degrade naturally. They accumulate in the soil, the water, the living organisms over time. So many PFAS are highly mobile. They travel through air, water, food chains. They make containment basically impossible. So another issue that complicates studying PFAS is in the environment is that out of the thousands of potential PFAS, only a handful, like I said, have been actually studied. Developing a comprehensive picture of their presence is really challenging. So in terms of the laboratory setting, the advantageous properties of PFAS means that they've been used in lab consumables, which is sort of why we created this poster, which was that the gloves, the tubing, the vials, any lab coats you might have that are waterproof, components of analytical instruments. So in addition, they're used in various consumer products, whether it's detergents or cosmetics. Means that the scientists may also have inadvertently brought it into the lab from home. The presence of PFAS in this lab environment becomes a real issue when you're needing to detect and quantify them at these ultra low levels. So typically at like parts per trillion level, which in parts per billion is challenging for most. So parts per trillion is like really challenging to avoid all these contamination possibilities. Achieving this using very sensitive instruments like LC-MS is generally preferred. So the presence of PFAS in the laboratory background means that there is a strong possibility for sample contamination during the collection, storage, prep, analysis workflows, which can skew the analytical data.
I have to say that nonstick cookware is my favorite example of choice, just because I feel like personally that's something I've dealt with, but it's something a lot of people can relate to, in that a lot of those have a defined usable life, let's say, until you start noticing that the Teflon coating is flaking off. And where do you think that's going? Oh, it's going into your omelet. Like, you're ingesting it. What does that mean, people?
Right.
Beyond the work part of it, and by that I mean discussing this topic with people in the industry. That is my go-to explanation for why this is a big problem.
Yeah, and nobody really told us for a long time that this was a serious problem, but you could imagine heating, your pans or whatever, it's going to come off into your food that you're eating. And there's a few like brands that are like way worse than other brands as well, but like having that knowledge today, I mean, you could be cooking with pans that are 10 years, 5 years old. You forget to change it or you don't change it and you're still using the same pan that had that nonstick, really bad stuff from the start. So it's not great. No.
Yeah, and some other conversations I've had on the topic, chemists have made a big deal, and rightfully so, about it was a very important achievement to create these forever chemicals. But now we're trying to figure out what the downside is and how much of a downside there, and it's still very much in progress, I'd say.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, every time we regulate more, they create more. So that's part of the
Yeah.
scientific workflow. They're like, oh, you're taking out these eight? Well, we'll just make 20 more that you haven't detected yet, So it's one of those.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on the role and necessity of the PFAS delay column in this workflow?
Yeah. The delay column essentially is just a very small column that's in front of your actual analytical column. Like we mentioned, components of the HPLC system used in the analysis may contain some PFAS. So that could be solvent, lines, or degasser membranes, or they could all be manufactured from these fluoropolymer things. Any PFAS in the system could therefore then be extracted into the mobile phase as it passes through the system. Additionally, solvents and buffers to prepare the mobile phase may also contain PFAS. So any PFAS that ends up in the mobile phase will build up on the HPLC column and it'll be released alongside the PFAS in our sample when we run a gradient analysis. So it does lead to inaccurate results. So it sort of keeps it back, that small column, so that the longer column can just get the actual PFAS from your sample, not all the PFAS coming from the system that could skew the results. When we first started working on methods for the PFAS, the first thing we did was run a blanket gradient with no sample injected, and we were easily able to detect like 5 commonly seen PFAS eluting from the system. So we knew that that would interfere with any sample analysis. So we take some steps to deal with the issue, such as replacing those PFAS containing components with suitable alternatives and using very high grade or PFAS dedicated solvents and buffers. But reliably eliminating that background is almost impossible. And this is where the PFAS delay column kind of comes in. The delay column is like I said, like an additional column that we install immediately before the sample injector so that the PFAS that might be present in the mobile phase and trapped on it instead of actually going into the analytical column, which would then get into your detector. So the sample is injected and the analysis is underway. Any background PFAS are physically separated from the PFAS in the sample. So this enables accurate, reliable detection and quantification. So the Avantor ACE delay column was specifically designed for this task, and it uses a highly retentive reversed phase packing material to maximize that separation of any background PFAS that might be present in the mobile phase. So PFAS originating from the LC system and mobile phase can be very hard to control and also is unpredictable. So using a delay column is really necessary for the accurate analysis of PFAS for LCMS.
Fair enough. Yeah, I appreciate you getting into that because that was an area I wasn't familiar with at all before the poster. Always happy to learn more specifically about some of the column technologies because it's super critical to the entire analysis, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the more that you can minimize like all these extraneous results coming from the lab or the system or all these things kind of happening, that's what can make your actual analysis more accurate. And then you can feel better about the actual results. But there's so many times where you get some results that are skewed because you're not using the correct equipment, what have you. So
And I think you've touched on these throughout the conversation about what are some of the best practices you would recommend to labs starting PFAS analysis to really minimize their contamination risks from day one?
limiting any background PFAS in the chromatographic system is really important. So installing the delay column and using the solvents that are high quality is definitely a good first step. Several suppliers, including Vantor, now offer the PFAS grade solvents, which are tested for PFAS analysis. So they're completely minimized as far as the amount of PFAS that would be in them. So LCMS instrument manufacturers will be able to offer advice on any system components that might need replacing. So I would go to your LC instrument manufacturer to figure that out. But avoiding the use of laboratory glass washers to clean the mobile phase bottles is really important, as the cleaning solutions and detergents, they might use a lot of PFAS. These bottles should be solvent washed, and it's also worth dedicating glassware specifically for the PFAS analysis rather than communal glassware that could have contamination. So in terms of other lab equipment, it's really important to ensure that they don't contain any fluoropolymers such as PTFE. For example, in extraction manifolds, PTFE is commonly used for taps and flow needles. So these parts can be readily swapped for polypropylene equivalent. So when we first started the PFAS analysis, we found it useful to test lab consumables such as the glove, the tinfoil, tissues, etc. So this helped us identify any potential sources of the contamination and then helped us eliminate or control those sources. So if contamination arises later on, then we can give you a good level of baseline knowledge to troubleshoot potential sources. So running a lot of blanks, I think, helps to troubleshoot and ensure reliable results are received. So establishing good working practices and maintaining a clean environment can also help. It's worthwhile screening new solvents of batches, buffers, vials, centrifuge tubes, and pipette tips that might come into the lab. So even if that particular brand was already previously like okayed. So any changes in manufacturing processes or things like packaging could have some low level of PFAS. So that'll always skew your results too. So really just taking like a iterative process, I think, is kind of the overall suggestion.
Yeah, and I would certainly double down on the idea where labs can really lean on the customer service, this customer support from vendors, as far as for organometation specifically for our nitrogen evaporators. We do have our PFAS free version of the NEVAP. So that's a conversation we could have with a lab where if we knew exactly what they were doing, happy to recommend the perfect configuration for them and hopefully get around some potential issues. That's why I was attracted to the poster outside of just the general topic, and that for a lab just starting today, if they know they were going to focus on PFAS and then secured those materials like the PFAS grade solvents and some of the instrumentation that's very specific for that type of work, they could avoid a whole lot of issues that I think you identified in the poster, where if it's a more of a general lab setup, there's so many different sources of potential contamination that you really need to rule out because the equipment is so general.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, going one by one to try and figure out where it's just like regular HPLC as well. Like trying to find, oh, there's a leak in the system. It's like, well, all right, well, let's start like the top and then go to the next piece and then go to the next one. And it's just like that iterative process that you need to do. PFAS are incredibly sensitive to that. So really, you're looking at such low levels. So anything that could spike it out of control needs to be detected. So yeah, vials, gloves, anything that could, mess with the results. You really got to worried about and test.
The poster noted that a rapid sample pre-screening methodology is under development, and a statement like that is kind of the classic, we'll cover this on the next poster. I was curious if you could elaborate on that at all. I know it's in process.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're really excited about the technology in general. It's like a guard column, but it's packed like a actual proper HPLC column would be. So it gives the results of a proper HPLC column. So it's like 10 millimeters long, and it connects from it, the inlet connects into it, and then it has its own male that connects right into the MS. So it is extremely short, and it's a great potential screening tool. So we're really excited about the technology in general for a variety of applications, whether it's PFAS or not. But laboratories such as environmental testing labs will receive samples with highly variable levels of PFAS due to different sources with contamination. So the issue is that because we are looking to quantify the PFAS at such low levels, if samples containing low levels of PFAS are unknowingly analyzed alongside samples containing exceptionally high levels of PFAS, then example samples from a site in the vicinity of where firefighting may have been deployed, there is potential for sample cross-contamination during sample processing workflows. So we felt that developing a rapid screening method would be beneficial and allow consumers to quickly assess incoming samples and enable highly contaminated samples to be identified and segregated before cross-contamination. So we did recently release this thing called, like I said, the Vantor ACE HTP-MS column. So that's high throughput mass spec column. So it's a very short, like I said, 1 centimeter long cartridge style LC column. And it was developed for running extremely fast LCMS separation. So it's ideal for this type of analysis. So using this column technology, we're able to develop a method that can detect 18 PFAS and 7 internal standards in a 60-second gradient. So
Wow.
this compares to typically around 10 to 30 minutes to require for these standard LCMS methods that are used. So using this alongside a simple dilute and shoot sample prep strategy, while not achieving the ultra low detection limits required for the full analysis, it does still provide like a very powerful tool for sample pre-screening so that you could de-risk the chance of the cross-contamination. So that's kind of where we see it as like an extra tool to de-risk sort of.
Very cool. Was there anything that we missed that you wanted to talk about today on this topic?
We're continuing to develop our PFAS solution. So we have unique bonding chemistries in our chromatography workflow. So those are being tested. Typically in PFAS analysis, it's just regular C18s kind of thing. So we're looking at unique chemistries like C18 PFP or other ones that could provide enough separation between critical peak pairs that could provide an extra benefit in general. So that's kind of where MAC-MOD specializes. We're not necessarily the company that people go to for your typical run-of-the-mill C18, but when people want the weird stuff that only we do, we kind of we step in there, and that's where we can be really valuable. So yeah, I think we offer some really great solutions, and I would say just continue to pay attention to some of the very innovative things that we have in store because there's a lot we have on the docket for the future. So.
That's great. I look forward to it. Edward, thanks for the time today, and I look forward to catching up soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, David. I appreciate it.